The Schoolteacher, Spring 1904. When Eleanor Avery first arrived in Hallux, she believed every problem could be solved if someone cared enough. She was young then, young enough to think concern was always welcome. The town itself seemed peaceful enough. Horse carts rolled slowly through the muddy streets. A blacksmith's hammer rang in the distance. Children laughed as they hurried towards the small schoolhouse each morning. It was while reviewing attendance records one quiet morning that she discovered the name, Elizabeth Marx. She was mentioned as a girl of 9 years old, but there was no record of her attending school, only the name. At first, Miss Avery assumed it was a clerical mistake. Hallux was a small town. Surely someone had forgotten a form or misplaced a document. Yet, when she began asking questions, she found that nobody seemed surprised that Elizabeth wasn't in school. At the general store, the conversation softened the moment she mentioned the child. Ian sees to her, the shopkeeper explained. At home? Miss Avery asked. As far as anyone knows. When Miss Avery suggested the girl ought to be among other children, a nearby woman hesitated before speaking. Well, she's Margaret's girl. Margaret. The name appeared again and again over the following days. The baker remembered her fondly. You could walk in carrying the worst day of your life, he said, dusting flour from his hands, and somehow leave remembering tomorrow was still coming. An older man outside the church nodded when Margaret's name was mentioned. She made people feel understood. Aunt Molly folded laundry while speaking of her. Margaret felt things strongly, joy, sadness, worry, everything. Sometimes it seemed like she understood your feelings before you did. Each memory carried the same quiet sadness. The town had loved Margaret Marx, and the town had mourned her when she died. One elderly woman even admitted there had once been whispers about the Marx family. Old Hallux nonsense, she said with a dismissive wave. People saying certain families knew things, felt things. Truth is, folk hear what they don't understand. Oh, folks fear what they don't understand. Then she smiled. Never harmed nobody, not the Marxes. The final piece came from Edwin, a cousin of the family. They stood together in the churchyard one Sunday while children played nearby. Why doesn't Elizabeth attend school? Miss Avery asked. Edwin looked toward the distant woods before answering. Grief. After Margaret's death, he explained, Ian Marx had changed. He was always a quiet man, but now it seemed she must have taken his voice with her to the grave. Elizabeth's all he's got, Edwin said, and she's a good child, bright, kind. She's got her mother's calm. By then, Miss Avery no longer feared neglect, only sorrow. A few days later, she followed the narrow road leading to the Marx homestead. The farm was simple, but well cared for. A garden flourished beside the house. Firewood was stacked neatly. Laundry swayed gently in the afternoon breeze. Ian Marx was repairing a fence when she arrived. He greeted her by name. How did you know my name? Town talks, he said with a faint smile, usually faster than it ought to. When she explained why she had come, he simply nodded. Figured eventually somebody would come asking about Elizabeth. They sat together on the porch. Miss Avery carefully explained that the girl should attend school. To her surprise, Ian agreed. Probably. The answer caught her off guard. He stared toward the trees for a long moment before speaking again. Margaret always wanted her educated proper. A faint smile crossed his face. Said education was like tending a field. Leave it alone too long and the weeds decide what grows. The smile faded. The town felt the loss of Margaret. He lowered his gaze. I lost part of my soul. Disappearance. The creep returned home. After a moment, he added, I still have Elizabeth and my mother, and I'm grateful for that. A saddened smile touched his face. "But what Margaret and I had only comes once." For a while neither of them spoke. Birdsong filled the silence. "Then there was Elizabeth," he continued, "and I reckon I held too tight after that." Miss Avery found herself softening. "That isn't the same as failing her." "No," Ian replied, "but sometimes love can make a man selfish." Finally, he called for his daughter. A moment later, Elizabeth appeared in the doorway. She was quiet, observant, calm in a way most children were not. "Hello," she said. Miss Avery smiled. "I hear you've been learning at home." "Papa teaches me," Elizabeth replied, "when he remembers arithmetic." Ian laughed softly. The sound seemed rare. When asked what she liked studying, Elizabeth thought carefully. "Nature, books, questions." "Questions?" The little girl nodded. "Sometimes answers are smaller than questions." Miss Avery blinked. Ian sighed fondly. "She says things like that all the time." Then came the question that mattered most. "Would you like to attend school someday?" Elizabeth looked first at her father, then back at Miss Avery. "Maybe," she paused, "but Papa gets lonely." The words settled quietly between them. At last Miss Avery understood. Not everything, but enough. This was not a story about neglect. That evening, back in her room, Miss Avery opened her notebook. She turned to a fresh page and wrote, "Elizabeth Marx." For a moment she stared at the name. The girl was bright, curious, polite, nothing like the neglected child she had half expected to find. She lowered her pen. Bright, thoughtful, well cared for. A few moments passed before she added another line. "Father grieving still." The words felt true, though they did not quite capture what she had seen. Ian Marx didn't strike her as a broken man, only a man carrying a sorrow that had never fully left him. After a moment, she wrote one final line, "Town grieving too." That seemed closer to the truth. Everywhere she went, people spoke of Margaret Marx as though they had lost a member of their own family. As she wrote, she heard rain on the roof and against the window. Tap, tap, tap. She still believed Elizabeth ought to attend school. Perhaps she always would. But now she understood why no one in town seemed eager to press the matter. Hallux had taught her something important. Sometimes helping people begins not with solving their problems, but with understanding what they have already survived. She went to bed. The next morning, when she stepped out of her cottage, she thought, it doesn't look like it rained last night.